Hello everyone, welcome to another weekly Outlook video. For those people who are new, welcome to the community. I do this weekly Outlook every Sunday, focusing on analyzing the market using ICT concepts. So as usual, we're going to start with DXY. And for those people who have been following me for some time, you know very well, we have been waiting for this bearish fair value gap to be inverted, and you can see finally price has inverted it, and this is nice. Now this confirms that we are likely to see more bullish dollar. And remember what we talked about. Once price swept this low and we had all this rejection, as much as we were seeing this bullish momentum here, we have been anticipating that finally this market will invert this fair value gap and we're likely to see bullish momentum for dollar because price cleared all this low, and you can see we had all this rejection. And of course, if you look at the daily time frame, you clearly could see price was respecting bullish PDRAs while at the same time violating bearish PDRAs. We will look at it shortly. So now, if you're going to see bullish dollar, I'm looking at this high as the next draw of liquidity. And finally, as I'm seeing a situation where dollar is likely to get to this high here and also this high here. Before we proceed, if you want to learn how to trade using ICT SMC concepts, you can join the 6 weeks program that I normally host every month. Check the link in the description box. So if dollar gets to this high and this high here, then that is a potential swing position for dollar. So for now, price has inverted this fair value gap. So as usual, we want to see price retrace. Tag this inversion fair value gap, and of course, if we look at the daily, we are likely to see some period raise. But as of now, on the weekly, we want to see price tag this before we continue with the bullish momentum. So now let's look at the daily time frame. And if you look at the daily time frame, this is what I was talking about. After price took all this low and we got a rejection on the weekly, you can clearly see price has been respecting bullish PDRAs. We make a high retrace to this fair value gap. Price inverted this bearish fair value gap. We made a high, tagged the inversion fair value gap, and finally, last week we had all this bullish momentum here. As usual, as much as we want to see more bullish momentum, we always want to see, first of all, a pullback or a retracement before price continues with the bullish move. And if you take a fib from this high, yes, from this low to this high here, you can see this fair value gap is at the 50% of the range, which is good. So on the daily time frame, I want to see price tag this daily fair value gap, and then we continue with the bullish momentum. And you can see clearly this daily fair value gap is at the same point with the weekly inversion fair value gap. So in the process, price will also have tagged the inversion fair value gap on the weekly time frame before we continue with the bullish momentum. So let's look at USDCHF. So USDCHF and dollar are positively correlated. So that means if dollar is bullish, we also want to see a bullish USDCHF. But if you look at USDCHF on the weekly time frame, you can clearly see price has noted inverted this bearish fair value gap. However, we already have that inversion with the DXY. So if dollar is bullish, you can see USDCHF is still dilly-dallying. It's taking its time. But finally, it should be able to catch up if you're going to have a bullish dollar, because it's a pair that is positively correlated with dollar. So on the daily time frame, you can clearly see last week, this is Monday, Tuesday, this is the only price action we had, and finally this is what we have. And if you look at it, you can see here there's a daily fair value gap right here. So already price has tagged this daily fair value gap. So as you're getting the retracement for DXY, you can see we still have this inversion fair value gap here for USDCHF. I can allow price to retrace to this inversion fair value gap before we continue with the bullish continuation, or price might use this to push price higher. However, I don't want USDCHF for price to invert this inversion fair value gap on the daily time frame. So this right here is my last line of defense for a bullish USDCHF. So I have my eyes on this daily fair value gap and this inversion fair value gap. So let's look at EURUSD, and we're going to start with the weekly time frame. Again, you can see finally this week EURUSD also prices finally inverted this weekly fair value gap the same way DXY also got that inversion, which is good. So Of course, we anticipate a retracement as much as we want to see more bearish continuation. So if price can still retrace to this weekly inversion fair value gap before we continue with that bearish momentum. So let's look at the daily time frame. On the daily time frame, if we take a fib and measure from this high to this low, you can clearly see 50% of the range. We have this fair value gap up here. And this fair value gap is in line with the weekly inversion fair value gap. So yeah, if you're going to get a pullback before we continue with the bearish move, which I anticipate a pullback, I'll want to see price to retrace to this daily fair value gap, which is also in line with the weekly inversion fair value gap before we continue with that bearish move. I know there's a tiny fair value gap down here. I also see it. There's also a potential that price can still use this to push price lower. However, for me, high probability, I honestly want to see us get that deeper retracement to this weekly inversion fair value gap and also tag this daily fair value gap before we see that bearish momentum. So let's look at GBPUSD. If you look at GBPUSD, of course, GBPUSD has been really heavily bearish compared to EURUSD. And so far on the weekly time frame, you can see we have this gap left behind by price. So we can consider this a volume imbalance. So I want to see price retrace to this before we continue with the bearish momentum. And of course, draw of liquidity. We have a lot of sell side liquidity here that I want to see price get to. So let's look at the daily time frame. On the daily time frame, the same thing. We still have a lot of gaps here where we also have the weekly gap. I want to see price tag this. So there's this order block right here, which price can still tag before we see that bearish move. So let's look at yen basket, and yen basket is just the yen. We'll start with the weekly time frame, and of course you can see yen has been bearish, and so far we have this tiny daily fair value, weekly fair value gap here. So if you're going to have a retracement, it would be nice if you get a retracement here before we continue going bearish. Of course, draw of liquidity is these relative equal lows right here. So let's look at the daily time frame. On the daily time frame, you can see this is where price is. We have this inversion fair value gap on the daily time frame, and also the weekly fair value gap is right here. And currently, so far, price has created an bearish order block here for yen basket. So either price gives that retracement again to this daily inversion fair value gap, or even sweep all these highs and tag this weekly inversion fair value gap, and we continue going lower, or the market can just use daily order block to push price lower for price to take these lows right here. So let's look at GBPJPY. So GBPJPY and yen basket are negatively correlated, which means you expect to see the opposite for the two pairs. Now, if you look at GBPJPY, of course, all this bearish momentum, price was tagging a monthly fair value gap. And currently where we stand, you can see price is actually inverted this weekly fair value gap here, which shows there's a high probability we are likely to see a bullish GBPJPY. So let's look at the daily time frame. If you look at the daily time frame, you can clearly see price has not inverted this daily fair value gap. Last week, weekly outlook, we were looking at this daily fair value gap, and we did not want to see price invert this for a bullish GBPJPY. So for this week, it would be nice if we get a retracement to this order block right here. And you can see there's also a gap here, tagging that gap, also tagging the weekly inversion fair value gap before we see more bullish momentum for GBPJPY. And of course, if it's going to be bullish, we have this high right here, and we also have this high right here. So let's look at gold. And if you look at gold on the weekly time frame, you can see price took out this high and also took out the previous week low, and this is what we have. Let's look at the daily time frame. On the daily time frame, I remember I marked this daily fair value gap last week, and I told you we don't want to see price invert this daily fair value gap if gold is still bullish. And so far, as you can see, last week we had all this drop, price tagged it, and so far price has also left behind a bearish fair value gap. So if gold is bearish, price will use this to push price lower. If it's bullish, then we would want to see price invert this daily fair value gap, and then from there we can anticipate more likely bullish gold momentum. But if dollar is really strongly bullish and we get a bullish dollar, finally gold will going to start seeing bearish momentum for gold. Also, if price fails to get to this high and just inverts this daily fair value gap, yeah, then at that point there's a high probability that gold is likely to see more bearish price action. So let's look at NAS 100, and of course last week you see price, here we have price tagged this, and we had this bearish momentum. Price took this low, and so far this is what we have, and you can see price has left behind this gap here. So it would be nice if you're still going to see bearish momentum, we want to see price tag this and then we go lower. If you're going to go lower, I'm looking at this sell side liquidity as the next target. So on the daily time frame, you can see the same thing. It's more clear. This is the weekly gap that we could see on the weekly time frame. So it would be nice if price comes for this before we continue with that bearish momentum. And you can see here, of course, this is an order block which got tagged last week, tagged it, and then so far we have this price action. And of course, last week it was more of consolidation. There's a lot of consolidation, but yeah, this is what I see. Price can still tag this order block one more time before we see that bearish momentum, but that is what I see as high probability for a bearish NAS 100. That is all I prepared for this weekly outlook video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.